as if Mark needs an introduction. And I think, Liz summed up, what the CDFI industry has accomplished in the last, some years. And, a lot, and most of that, I think we'll agree, was because of Mark's leadership. And I was trying to think back, the first time I met Mark was in 1992. And he was running the CDFI coalition, and we were trying to figure out what that was all about. And then I was actually on NCCA's board, or I think it was NCCA's board, it could have been NACDLF, when we actually hired Mark. And Jim Collins's remarks reminded me this morning that we had no idea if he knew how to drive that bus, but I guess he has all these years. And in fact, then when I came to Oweesta 8 years ago or so, and I had never run a national organization, I just really looked to Mark as an example, and I thought, well, I'll just do what he does, fake it. But, and about that time was when the CDFI fund was, they were in the startup of having the natives set aside to help tribes start CDFIs. Of course, we looked to OFN immediately for help. I mean, at that time, Oweesta was just me, and a short time later, Stuart. But, OFN was there right then. We knew that we had to figure out how to guide this process and help guide tribes. And together, we built a really great training program. And Mark was always, just tell us what you want us to do, tell us how you want it to do it. And I'm really appreciative of that. So all these years I've known Mark, and we've gotten to be really good friends. And I appreciate that very much. Although I do have to say that, there's been a time or two that our friendship was really tested. And one of those times is because we'd gotten to be such good friends, I invited him and his family to my ranch. We have a working cattle ranch, and I tell you, coming up with 4 horses, we're cowboys in our ranch, and so our horses aren't dude horses, but I tried really hard to come up with 4 horses that people with questionable riding skills could handle, and so Jennifer was riding Jerry, Nathan was riding Josh, and Clara was riding Casper. But Mark was riding Chief. Now, Chief's my horse. He's passed away the last couple of weeks, but if anybody has horses or raised as horsemen, you really don't let people get on your best horse. Chief had never made a mistake in his life with me, never. He was just an excellent horse. But because Mark was my best friend, at least a respected friend that I really wanted, him to experience the best horse on the place, which I've never done before, except with the exception of Jeremy Nowak, which is another story. So I thought this morning about Jim Collins's remark about preparing your team, and so we saddled up that morning, and we went out of the barn, started out for a ride, and I looked up, and Chief, who had never hopped in his life, was hopping up this hill with Mark. And not only that, Mark was falling off the back end down the hill. And I was like, what did I get myself into? Well, Mark did get back on. I had to plead with him. I said, please, please, Mark, I promise he won't do this again. But it did test our friendship, because, I really did have to send Chief to therapy after that. He was never the same. So we've invited them back before, but I said no riding for you, Mark. But you're still welcome. So if you want to know more about Mark, read his bio. So thank you.
Thank you, Elsie. You should have known that I was going to fake that I knew how to ride a horse, too, as well as faking riding a bus, right? There's more to that story. And Elsie didn't tell it exactly right, because hopping in South Dakota equals bucking in Philadelphia, right? So. And as I was lying in the mud, right, my side was throbbing, right, my wife was watching, right, on another horse, right, and the way she tells this story, and this is an appropriate story for where we are today, as she tells this story, she was sitting there watching this happen, watching me get bucked violently, Elsie, and watching me fly off and land on the ground and thinking, you know, the vacation was over and that was the end of the horse ride and all that. And she thought, this couldn't possibly get any worse. At which point her horse decided to take off and start running really fast. And she said, oh yeah, it can get worse. And that's probably not an inappropriate way to start my comments today at a time like this. So thank you very much, Elsie, and thank you all for being here. Earlier this year, in June, right about the time we knew for certain that the presidential race was going to pit Senators McCain and Obama, I got on board a train, an Amtrak train, from Washington, D.C. back to Philadelphia. And a well-dressed commuter sat down next to me. He told me he'd been riding that train for about 30 years, and he struck me as a person with a lot to offer, real passion about his work, and hard questions to answer about his future. As the train pulled into the Wilmington, Delaware train station, we shook hands before Senator Biden said goodbye and hurried off the train. And as I watched him walk to the exit, I thought, it's too bad he's never going to make it into the White House. And I underestimated President-elect Obama, too. Almost 2 years ago, Bob Weisbord, a good friend who some of you know, sat me down to persuade me to join him in backing Obama. And I was reluctant. I knew he gave a really good speech, but I also know that a good speech goes only so far. And I questioned whether American voters were ready to elect an African-American president. I was wrong about that, too. I underestimated American voters. It was just 40 short years ago that racism, hatred, and fear fueled the murder of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. as he stood on a moral mountaintop, looking out at a promised land that perhaps only he had the vision to see. And as President-elect Obama walked off the stage in Grant Park on November 4th, a lot of us wondered if we as a people were crossing into that promised land. So I was wrong about Biden. I was wrong about Obama. And I was wrong about the American public. But at least I can say I was right about one thing. 3 years ago, when we introduced the Opportunity Finance brand in Los Angeles, some of you wondered aloud whether we could succeed with a brand that started with the letter O. And as we enter the Obama era of American history, I am here to tell you, yes, we can. So welcome to Opportunity Finance Network's 24th Annual Conference, and welcome to Albuquerque, as Liz noted, a remarkable city in a truly enchanted, and I should note, blue state. It's an honor for me to stand before you today. I want to offer my thoughts on where the opportunity finance industry is going and the reason I believe we must and will get there. I will talk about the greedy false prophets who have undermined the economy. I'll talk about the early prophets of our own work, the promise that our work brings to a troubled nation, and what I believe can and must happen. New Mexico is a great place to be as we work through a transformational moment for our industry, for our economy, for our global financial system, and for our nation. The past is visceral here. You can sense it in the mountains and the mesas. You can see it where Native history blends with Latino culture and where the U.S. government overlaps tribal authority. You can sense the moment and the challenges as we prepare for our nation's first African-American president. As we look for signs of innovative new policies replacing tired old ones, and as we peer through the haze of economic and financial crises for a glimpse of better times. As a nation, as an industry, and as individuals, we face uncertainty, challenges, and opportunities at a scale and scope we have rarely seen before and perhaps never will see again. You knew when you arrived here that things are bad in our communities and bad in our nation. I want you to know as you leave here that you are key, you're the key to making things better, and that we have the experience and the capacity to help make things good again. And for that reason, Opportunity Finance Network is presenting this conference to prepare us for our future, to respond to our present, and to build on our past. We will discuss how CDFIs are responding to the economy. We will consider our role in fixing the financial market meltdown. We will explore policy possibilities and risks. We will honor the achievements of native CDFIs and will celebrate some of your peers. This conference is full of things meant to help you. And our best resources are the people who are in this room. And so we have tried to organize the conference to give you as many chances and ways to learn with them and from them. The capitalization track in this conference could not be more timely than in the middle of a once-in-a-lifetime credit freeze. The emerging issues track gives us the chance to get our brains around the complex and fast-paced market environment that we are working through. Policy Now leverages our shared policy campaign anchored by the Next American Opportunity, Good Policies for a Great America. At the OFN membership meeting tomorrow, to which everyone is invited, we will talk about how we are moving our opportunity agenda forward. You are the key to our opportunity agenda. To succeed, we need you like never before to tell your story, to reach out to federal policymakers, and to leverage your networks with you, and to coordinate closely with OFN's policy team. We have a green finance track this week. OFN intends with you to make green sustainable financing a central strategy for CDFIs. The strategic communications track will help more of you embrace and advance our common effort to tell our story more effectively and to reach new markets of investors, funders, policymakers, and consumers. We are benefiting this week from the work of the native CDFI sector. From the opening ceremony reception last night, to the Native CDFI track, to the Native CDFI award ceremony tomorrow night, to the concluding Native flag ceremony, we want to honor the accomplishments of Native CDFIs, but we also want to learn from them. We're continuing a tradition this year that we started last year of making our conference gifts meaningful gifts. This year, I'm proud that we are making a $5 donation on behalf of each of you to the National Indian Education Association. Based on your feedback, we've introduced a conference track this year on CDFI fundamentals for new CDFI staff, for CDFIs moving into new financing areas, for small and emerging CDFIs, and for funders and investors who simply want to learn more about the basics of CDFIs. This morning, we learned in a remarkable session with Jim Collins, one of the most interesting and important business thinkers of our time. There are many ways to continue that learning, some of which Jim sketched out, and the discussion sessions that we're holding this afternoon. A little later in my comments, I'll talk about how his work will affect our ability to succeed. Now, one thing we all learned is that Good to Great recognizes that every CDFI can be great. This evening, we'll see that idea in practice when we recognize the 2008 awardees of the Wachovia Next Awards for Opportunity Finance in partnership with the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation. To start, tonight we will award $100,000 in 4 $25,000 awards to CDFIs that have achieved great things in the past year in the areas of policy, financial performance, innovation, and impact. And then things really heat up when we announce the multi-million-dollar recipients of the 2008 Wachovia Next Awards for Opportunity Finance and award $8.25 million. 10 of your peers, 10 exceptional CDFIs, earned spots in the semifinals of this year's awards, and 4 made it to the finals. I want your help today to recognize first our 6 semifinalists. They are exceptional CDFIs, and they deserve your respect and admiration. I'm going to name them, and I'm going to ask each of them to stand, and I'd like each of them to stand and all of the staff from each of them to stand. So we have representatives up front, but I want you to see the whole team when they're here. So first, ASI Federal Credit Union is one of our semifinalists. Corporation for Supportive Housing is our second semifinalist. Lower East Side People's Federal Credit Union is one of our semifinalists this year. Low Income Investment Fund is a semifinalist this year. And let's have all the staff. I know there are more here. Thank you. And Southern Bancorp is our 6th semifinalist this year. And 4 finalists will be competing tonight for $8.25 million in grants and low-cost long-term loans. All 4 finalists deserve recognition and all 4 deserve investments. But we will award $2.75 million to one of two finalists in the $10 million to $50 million financial assets category. Let's meet our 2 finalists. First, Community First Fund of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And let's see the staff. Where are the rest of the staff? There they are. And our second finalist in that category is HomeWise Incorporated of Santa Fe, New Mexico. To top off our awards tonight, in the $50 million plus category, we will award $5.5 million to either IFF, based in Chicago, Illinois, or the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund, based in Concord, New Hampshire. Let's see all the staff here. Thank you. The evening starts at 6:30, but it ends only after we're all exhausted and exhilarated from a night of dancing and partying in a celebration of CDFIs. So, brush off the brims of your hats, warm up your cowboy boots, put on your bolo ties, and let's get ready to party tonight. This conference is the product of a year-long collaboration, and it would not be possible without unique contributions from many partners, and I'm deeply grateful to all of them. Let me begin with our major sponsors, all of which provided substantial financial and human resources. And first, let me thank Bank of America and Liz and her team and Andrew, who are our platinum sponsor this year and have committed to being our platinum sponsors for 2009 and 2010. Our gold sponsors, Capital One, Citi, Home Depot Foundation, and Wachovia. Please give them a round of applause. Our silver sponsors are HSBC, JP Morgan Chase, and Merrill Lynch. And I also want to thank all of our bronze and community sponsors, so please give them a round of applause as well. We also need to give our thanks to our partners in planning, organizing, and convening this event. Our local co-hosts have done an extraordinary job at making sure that you experience New Mexico as it is meant to be experienced. So our thanks go, first of all, let me give them all together, to Axion New Mexico, to HomeWise Incorporated, the Loan Fund, and the New Mexico Community Capital. Please stand up so we can say our thanks. And our enduring appreciation goes to Oweesta, our national co-host, native convening co-host, and partner. Thank you. The Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City, in whose region we are meeting, played a critical role in our planning as well, so thank you to them. And last, please help me thank Donna Fabiani and the OFN staff who produced this great gathering. Last year, some of you may remember, we introduced the Ned Gramlich Lifetime Achievement Award for Responsible Lending. Our highest tribute, the Ned Gramlich Award, recognizes people who, like Ned, have dedicated their lives, and not just their careers, to our shared enterprise. Last year, we honored Ned posthumously. This year, we are honoring Ned by giving the award to another unsung champion, a dedicated pioneer, an innovator, a leader, and an inspiration. And the choice this year was unanimous, and it was easy. Please join me in recognizing Cliff Rosenthal, President of the National Federation of Community Development Credit Unions. Cliff's work reflects his lifelong passion for justice, his unmatched commitment to low-income and low-wealth people and places, and his unerring moral sense. For the Federation and for our entire industry, Cliff is a leader of leaders. Cliff has grown the community development credit union sector to more than 200 institutions in 46 states, managing more than $4 billion and serving more than 1 million people. He's provided assistance to hundreds of CDCUs and leadership to our entire industry. In fact, Cliff is so effective on the ground and so modest about his work that very, very few people know the instrumental role his vision has played for all of us. It was Cliff's prophetic proposal in the late 1980s for a national neighborhood bank that inspired the CDFI Fund. On a more personal note, Cliff is a great friend. I see him as a partner and look to him as a trusted counselor. He taught me how to lead a national membership organization. Only the good parts, the mistakes are all my own. When to compromise, when to fight, and how to win victories that matter and that last. One of Ned's close friends and a colleague, Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke, issued a statement when he learned that Cliff would be receiving this award, and this is what he said. I offer my sincere congratulations to Cliff on being awarded the Ned Gramlich Lifetime Achievement Award for Responsible Lending. Cliff has dedicated an illustrious career to expanding economic opportunities for lower-income households and communities. His considerable contributions toward that end exemplify Ned's legacy as an advocate for policies and practices that help families at the lower levels of the income scale improve their financial well-being. I say thank you, Cliff. On behalf of everyone here, the entire opportunity finance industry, it's an honor for all of us to work by your side. Now, I vividly remember the beautiful July day in the summer of 1993 when Cliff and I sat with perhaps 100 others on the White House lawn watching President Clinton announce plans for the CDFI Fund. It was almost too good to be true. Indeed, what I remember most is the sinking feeling that that July moment was our high point, that the President's proposal would get eroded, that Congress would turn Cliff's beautiful concept and our elegant recommendations into an ugly program. But for complex reasons that we dared not expect, we got a law and a CDFI fund that was almost exactly what we asked for. In part, we were lucky. In part, we were smart. And in part, we had friends in the right places. But most of all, we knew what we were doing. We did it well. And we built our policy recommendations on that. We stuck to what we knew, and we delivered. 15 years and $20 billion of financing later, we are delivering still. I can't really talk about this moment that we are, this moment as we're here in the room together of opportunity without thinking about how we got here. We have met as Opportunity Finance and those other names we had before and learned together for 24 years, notably in Waltham, Massachusetts at our organizing conference in 1985 when we set our course. In Newark, New Jersey in 1994 when we welcomed in the CDFI Fund as a marker of a new era. In 2001 in Memphis, Tennessee, just a month after September 11th, when we learned how much CDFIs can contribute when the economy and markets are in distress. And in 2004 in Chicago, immediately following the presidential election, when we learned how important it is for us to come together to share our experiences and to plan. But this year's conference, in the middle of an epic transformation in the economy and financial markets and policy, is rooted in our 1990 conference, which was the first one that I attended. Let me take you back there. There were fewer than 100 people who met that fall in the basement of the 4-H Conference Center just outside Washington, D.C. What links it to this year is a remarkable, prophetic plenary on the relationships among capital markets, public policy, and CDFIs. To understand then, what happened then is to realize what we can and must do now. The plenary discussion centered on a set of harsh questions about the economic, financial, and policy mainstream. We asked, would Wall Street or Capitol Hill or the White House ever notice or care that CDFIs exist? And should they? And we asked what would happen when, not if, but when, the federal government or the Federal Reserve stepped in to rescue Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, to make explicit the implicit promise behind their federal charters. And last, we asked, as deregulation gained momentum, what would financial institutions do if they could choose between regulated and unregulated marketplaces? One choice would be a completely unregulated charter without a government safety net. The other choice for financial institutions would be a government safety net with commensurate regulations ranging from CRA to capital ratios. That 1990 discussion anticipated by almost 2 decades what I believe is the defining challenge of this conference, of this year, of this economic crisis, the next Congress, and perhaps our industry. What must our global financial system do, and what must it be if we are working toward a sustainable and inclusive prosperity? Or, to put it another way, how must the financial system as we understand it today improve to serve our core purpose of aligning capital with social, economic, and political justice? At the time, we saw ourselves as powerless to effect change. I found myself as a newcomer sitting in a room full of reluctant prophets. We lacked the institutional ego and perhaps the track record to believe in the power of our work and our experiences. No more. Today, we are ready and able to leverage the financial marketplace toward our core purpose, to bend the moral arc of the universe toward justice. We have an opportunity now that we did not dream possible 18 or 10 or 5 or even 1 year ago, and we have the ability to act. The world around us has changed, and as a result, what you do and what you say has never been more important. Today, we work in an era of bad money with painful, empirical evidence that bad money always produces bad results. And so we face a national crisis centered on the question whether good money can defeat bad money. I'm here to say that it can, and that it will, if we do all we can by doing what we do best. I believe we will prevail. I believe we can help good money chase bad money from the marketplace. Because we know who we are and who we are not. Because we know what we can and should do and what we cannot and should not do. Because we deliver results. And because we know that we are right. We did not know that in 1990. I believe we know that now and that others know it too. Now we know. Now we know what we can do in policy. In 1992, just 2 years after that prophetic plenary, we started our march to the CDFI fund, which has provided almost $1 billion in performance-based equity. And this year, to the Next American Opportunity, the remarkable effort to take the policy offensive that so many of you helped to produce. Now we know. Now we know that the opportunities before us are growing. They range from a federal bond guarantee program for CDFIs to a modernized and expanding Community Reinvestment Act. Now we know what you're capable of in financing. Since 1990, you and your colleagues have originated more than $20 billion in responsible, productive financing benefiting low-income and low-wealth people and places. Now we know what happens when the federal government steps in, not just at Fannie and Freddie, but at Bear Stearns, at Merrill Lynch, at Washington Mutual, at AIG, and at Goldman Sachs, at banks across the nation, at mutual funds, and at money market funds. In fact, now we know how the story starts. We now must take our seats at the table to decide how the story should end. As a nation, we're engaged in redefining what financial markets can and can't do, how they work, who they serve, and what role they should and should not play. Now we know that we must play an important part in rewriting the laws and regulations that will govern the financial sector. In May, the OFN board asked me to organize an effort to make sure we take our seat at the table. We are starting, but just starting, to work with a broad coalition of financial, CDFI, regulatory, civil rights, consumer, and other groups. And now we know that we will not miss this moment to act. We need to do our part to drive bad money out of the financial marketplace. Now we know decisively what financial institutions decide when given the choice of deregulation versus regulation. Goldman Sachs, the last remaining investment bank at the time, answered that without hesitation this fall when it chose a regulated bank charter over its investment bank business model. And as a result, now we know, as we have always known, something fundamentally important about public policy. Sound and prudent standards, regulations, and marketplace behavior are fundamental to strong financial markets and general economic well-being. As we in our communities have experienced, those false prophets who promised false profits did so at great cost to themselves, we hope, and to others. I want to underscore the meaning of what it is we know. Those of us who kept to the fundamental principles of responsible credit, who were clear about our hedgehog concepts, and who kept pushing on the flywheel of opportunity finance, have something important to say to policymakers and to teach to Wall Street. So why was Washington listening to Alan Greenspan and Angelo Mozillo, but not to you? What you know and what you have done is a matter of national importance. In a year when our nation elected a former community organizer to the presidency, when a conservative Republican president effectively nationalized the financial marketplace, and when Alan Greenspan publicly renounced his greed is good ideology, now we know that nothing is impossible. Now we know that this is decisively a new era. It should be the era of responsible finance, and it should be our era. If you studied economics, you learned about Gresham's law, which states that bad money always chases good money out of a marketplace. Bad money to Gresham is when the nominal value of an asset is materially different from its commodity or its trading value. This last decade or so has been a really bad money era. From appraisals that inflated asset values to brokers who falsified borrower incomes. From rating agencies that assigned values to securities and derivatives far greater than they could reasonably know them to be. To investors who deluded themselves into believing that the marketplace had performed financial alchemy that spun gold out of greed. From regulators who facilitated irresponsible lending through lax regulation and enforcement, to national leaders who encouraged home ownership to excess. From some borrowers who knowingly bought homes they could not afford, to lenders who maliciously and greedily introduced products that they were understanding were disasters just waiting to happen. We understand the problem. We know how to lend responsibly. No one knows better than you do what works and what does not work. We do not know all the answers, but I believe in this room and in this industry that we know as well as anyone else what it takes to rewrite Gresham's law. And when we do, when we prove that good money can drive bad money out of the marketplace, we'll explain what we know and we'll call it the law of opportunity. And because we know that nothing is impossible, we know that we can and will prove Gresham wrong. We have the standing and the knowledge to do so because for 30 years we've done what others said was impossible, because we knew it was essential. We have the strategic and tactical experience to intervene. We have the networks in our communities and in our business relationships and across our industry to mobilize for change. We cannot afford to fail. If we let Congress and the Obama administration and the regulatory agencies implement the wrong solutions, or if we let them fix only half the problem, or worst of all, if we fail to make it clear that repeating the past is not an option, we will be stopping short of our core purpose. I chose to do this work 18 years ago because I saw in this nascent industry the potential to make the world better, one transaction at a time. To bundle those transactions with our relationships and to put them in play in the marketplace of civic discourse and public policy. to package our transactions, our relationships, our ideas, and our expertise into a new form of economic, social, and political security rooted in our vision of a world where all people have the resources to act in the best interest of their communities, themselves, and future generations. Our opportunity now is to leverage what we know and what we do and what we stand for into a set of changes in financial market practice, regulations, laws, and standards that will make good money the norm for our communities, for our nation, and for the global economy. We will do that in practice, and we will do that in policy. Because this is what it means to create transformational change grounded in a transactional business. So, what do we do now? Let me outline for you a set of actions toward that transformational end and ask you to work with OFN to improve and to implement them. First, as we've always done, we need to set a high standard of performance for our work and for the programs that work with us. Good policies are results-oriented and results are performance-based. We cannot change the government's tendency to create process-heavy solutions. We can, however, do a few things to counter the old lowest common denominator approach. Most important, we need to continue to perform and produce as we have for the last 30 years. The world is watching us more closely than ever before. As long as we stick to what we know and deliver on what we promise, we will be fine. And we need to explain what works and why. We need to articulate why the CDFI fund should be the standard for other government programs. It is performance-based, it is competitive, it is anchored by CDFI market expertise, and it leverages private capital like nobody's business. And we need to explain again and again why responsible lending must be the standard for all lending, for reasons that should be self-evident, but apparently are not. Second, we need to change the deregulatory rhetoric of the last 30 years and recognize the positive role of market-based regulation in responsible finance. For the last 30 years, we've been on the losing side of the war of words. There are at least 3 things that need to happen at the federal level. The government needs to extend a community reinvestment responsibility to all financial institutions. We know that means insurance companies, it means mutual funds, money market funds, investment banks, if there are any, and others. Investing in opportunity markets is a good thing. It's not a burden. Regulators and others need to rethink risk, as Jim Collins was talking about a little bit earlier today. For 30 years, we've been told that CDFIs are high risk. I think risk is a practical devil that quietly settles in around lax thinking, lack of discipline, avoidable errors, oversights, greed, and overconfidence. This new thinking about risk needs to recognize that risk is a threat in theory but a danger in practice, and that CDFIs are good at intervening between theory and practice. Also, financial services policy needs to establish a level playing field. We cannot have effective regulatory policy otherwise. This is true for institutional and product risk across financial institution types, at least as much as it is for CRA or what replaces it. It is the only way to manage systemic risk, and it's exactly what the markets and the government failed to do for the last decade. Third, we need to realize our value in the financial system. If CDFIs are the tail to the financial services industry's dog, maybe it's time we did some wagging. When we started some 30 years ago, we were a solution to an access to credit problem on the margins. For much of the last decade, we were a solution to a cost of credit problem. Now, we are again an access to credit solution with a much, much expanded role. We can help in at least 2 ways. Much as we did through the mid-1990s, we can be the fulcrums on which traditional credit levers rest. We can leverage financing where mainstream lenders and investors are reluctant to go. In addition, we can be lighthouse lenders, helping the big boats of capital avoid hidden dangers and pointing the way to productive ports. Our market knowledge is more valuable than ever. We should not hesitate to share that knowledge in the interest of increasing capital flows to the markets we are serving, and we should not be reluctant to expect to be compensated for the value we provide. CDFIs often function as the market research and development arm for the financial market. It's time to structure formal business relationships that value this function. Fourth, Congress and the White House needs to invest in a big way in opportunity finance. Here are 6 things the federal government should do right away. 1, appropriate at least $250 million annually to the CDFI fund, including support for the native CDFI sector and small and emerging CDFIs. The appropriation should incorporate at least 2 statutory changes. The fund should establish an innovation bank based on the concept that Jeremy Nowak presented in The Next American Opportunity. R&D is one of the things that CDFIs cannot easily pay for from fee and spread income, yet it's one of the things we do exceedingly well and where we create unique value. In addition, the fund needs to be able to distribute a mix of small and large investments in support of high-volume CDFIs and high-volume financing systems. The 1994 cap of $5 million over 3 years made sense then. It will not make sense, and it will be inadequate as appropriations rise sharply. 2, the CDFI fund must continue to use new market tax credits to support CDFIs and other financial institutions that maximize long-term social and economic impacts to communities. 3, Congress should appropriate at least $165 million to the newly created Capital Magnet Fund, with a corresponding appropriation of at least $335 million to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund as part of a short-term economic stimulus program. 4, the Treasury Department must open TARP to all CDFIs. At least $1 billion out of the $700 billion should directly support CDFIs. In addition, Treasury must require banks that receive TARP investments to support and partner with CDFIs on a performance basis. 5, the Federal Housing Finance Agency should open the federal home loan banks to CDFI membership and capital access in the first quarter of 2009. The home loan banks can provide a rare source of liquidity to some and perhaps many CDFIs. Last year, Congress authorized this, and now the FHFA must implement it quickly. 6, Congress should approve OFN's legislation to create a federal bond guarantee for CDFIs. In its current form, our bond bill would generate $1 billion of affordable 40-year debt each year for 5 years, $5 billion in total. Now, these 4 broad steps that I just laid out, high standards, responsible regulation, CDFI value, and federal investment, are necessary and would make and will make a significant difference. But each of them alone and all of them together are incremental changes, and we need transformational change if we're going to prove Gresham wrong. President Obama could change the game with a stroke of his presidential pen on January 20th. Here's how. President Obama can and should issue an executive order directing federal agencies to implement within 30 days a policy based on what I call the opportunity principle, that it is an affirmative fiduciary responsibility of all financial institutions to invest in CDFIs in particular and opportunity finance in general. This policy would spur tens of billions of dollars of private financing at affordable rates into CDFIs that would in turn and over time generate hundreds of billions, perhaps trillions of dollars of new financing benefiting low-income and low-wealth people and places. This alone would make it possible for opportunity finance to help push bad money out of the market and restore a good money economy. A similar and equally simple policy change helped to create the venture capital industry in this country. Let me be specific. The policy I am suggesting would require that all financial institutions must invest at least 0.1% of their assets under management in CDFIs and opportunity finance. Failure to comply would be a breach of their fiduciary responsibilities. No exceptions. The financing would be at rates and on terms that CDFIs can use productively. At this point, it's a logical, reasonable, and necessary next step. It's a simple but transformational stride toward our core purpose of aligning capital with social, economic, and political justice. It would be the defining principle of a new era in which good money pushes bad money out of our economy, where responsible finance replaces irresponsible finance, and where hope and opportunity supplants greed and division. It is what we, the opportunity finance system, can do to help fix a deeply troubled world. I hear a lot of talk these days, and perhaps you do too, about the Joshua generation. Joshua led the Israelites into the promised land after Moses died. The reference today, of course, is to President-elect Obama as Joshua, to Dr. King's Moses. We tend to think about the promised land in, to borrow a phrase, irrationally exuberant terms. But in Joshua's generation, the promised land was a place of violence and division, as it sadly is today. So let's be brutally honest. We know that the challenges we face as a nation and the world are overwhelming and they're frightening. And we know our industry's role in fostering progress, real, sustainable solutions, is limited. We can only do so much. But I believe that our role is greater than we sometimes want to allow, because opportunity carries with it the heavy weight of responsibility. It is one thing to see ourselves as responsible for local communities, and something else altogether to bear the weight of our nation's social, economic, and political well-being. But that is our responsibility, and that is our opportunity. Nothing about our work or the challenges ahead is easy or simple. We're small players in a big money, high-stakes game, but we can prevail, and we know how, because Jim Collins told us how this morning. We need to be clear with ourselves and with our organizations what should never change and what must change to stimulate progress, what is core and what is not core. Right now, we need to decide what each of us individually and all of us together can do to push bad money out of the marketplace. We need to make sure we have the right people working with us. I believed 18 years ago that the people in opportunity finance are the right people to transform our world toward our vision. I'm more sure of that today. We need people who understand that CDFIs exist to transform and not simply to transact. We need to continue to think and act with discipline. As an industry, we're already good at this, as Jim Collins acknowledged. It's a defining characteristic, I think, of the people and the organizations in this room. We need to be brutally honest about the facts in front of us, yet confident that we will prevail. In our transformational role, we will prevail only by keeping our common purpose, our core purpose, in front of our self-interests. We need to be clear about our hedgehog concepts. At OFN, we are working with a hedgehog concept of expanding and transforming the opportunity finance system. We want to expand it by persuading more mainstream institutions to join in our industry's work. And with you, we're working to transform it by proving that good money can defeat bad money, by redefining the standards of success in finance, and by finding ways to leverage the best of Wall Street and Main Street to serve the interest of the people and places we serve. Most important, we need to continue to turn the flywheel of social, economic, and political justice. We've been doing it for 30 years or longer, and Cliff Rosenthal is a model for how powerful it is when you find the right thing to do and you keep at it without pause. I think the flywheel is probably the most natural thing for many, if not all of us, because we do not know and cannot imagine any other way. This is what we do, and this is who we are. And we have some real momentum. When God told Joshua in commanding him to cross the Jordan River into the Promised Land, and what Joshua told his people as they prepared for that moment is this: be strong and resolute. Nothing more. Be strong and resolute. I hope this conference this week gives you much of what you need over the next year. After we leave here on Friday, we will come back together for OFN's 25th anniversary annual conference in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I hope you will join us. And so as I wish you well for the remainder of this exciting week and this extraordinary time, as I thank you for participating in this conference and in this shared enterprise, and as I ask you for your help and urge you to action, I can only echo Joshua. Be strong and resolute. Thank you.